Hello, my name is Lynn Bob. It rhymes with Saab cars. Lots of people have trouble with how to pronounce it. But I'm a teacher, a writer, a speaker, a preacher, a Presbyterian minister. I've done a lot of different things over my lifespan. Mostly right now I'm writing. So the first lesson in this 6-lesson series on spiritual disciplines is about fasting. Now, Jesus did fast, and you could argue that, the Follow Me curriculum focuses on things that Jesus did or things that were in the Gospels, and so fasting should have been in there. Most people can't relate very well to the way Jesus fasted. I mean, he fasted for 40 days. That's a really long time. That's like overwhelming. So fasting, the place to start is not necessarily with Jesus. The place to start is by looking at fasting throughout the whole Bible. In the Hebrew scriptures, David fasted. One of the interesting things is he fasted with his men to mourn when his really good friend Jonathan died, but he fasted alone to pray when God said that God would take the life of the baby that he conceived with Bathsheba. So David fasted with others, David fasted alone, Esther fasted with others, Ezra fasted, the Jews fasted on Yom Kippur. There's all kinds of examples of fasting in the Hebrew scriptures, the Old Testament. One of the passages about fasting that I really like comes from Acts 13. And this is a time when the disciples were in Antioch and they were praying and fasting. It's just a little toss-off comment. They were praying and fasting. And the Holy Spirit spoke to them and said, "Set apart Saul, Paul, and Barnabas for the mission to the Gentiles." And so it was like kind of a normal thing. They're praying and fasting. But the Holy Spirit speaks to them. And then we know that Christian history was shaped by that message that the Holy Spirit gave them to set apart Paul and Barnabas, go off to preach to the Gentiles. Jesus says in Matthew chapter 6, when you fast. So there's a presupposition that we will fast. That's kind of got lost in the 20th century, but fasting is really coming back into view among Christians now. So I wrote a whole book on fasting and not just this short little lesson. And I interviewed dozens and dozens of people who fasted, probably still fast. And those people told me about forms of fasting that were absolutely fascinating. I talked to someone who fasted from reading the newspaper during Lent because she wanted to read her Bible at breakfast. Fasting from a newspaper? That's a form of fasting? Lots of people, of course, nowadays are talking about fasting from all kinds of media, fasting from social media, fasting. People talked, when I did the interviews, they talked about fasting from movies, from restaurants. It was just the most fascinating view for me because I had thought fasting is either fasting from all food and drinking water, or fasting is some sort of limit of food, fasting from sweets, fasting from meat. So I thought fasting just involved food. And in fact, if you have an eating disorder or a history of an eating disorder, you should never fast from food. You should try one of these other forms of fasting that don't involve food. We don't want the things that we're proposing at church to put people back into eating disorders, for heaven's sakes. So let me give you the definition of fasting that I use. It's voluntary denial of something for a specific period of time, for a spiritual purpose, by an individual, family, community, or nation. So, our nation in the United States, Abraham Lincoln called a national fast 3 times during the Civil War. We don't tend to remember that. We tend to think fasting is just on the part of an individual. But when I did the interviews, small groups fast, whole churches had fast projects that they did together. So it can definitely be communal. It's for a spiritual purpose. To fast, to lose weight is not a Christian fast. That's a diet. And so we want to make a distinction between, I'm giving up something just because it would be a good idea versus I'm giving up something to make space to be with God. So I interviewed a woman who did a long fast. And the first time she did it, she spent her lunch hours at work reading the Bible and praying. The second time she did it, she just went about life as usual and worked all through her lunch breaks. And she said that this first fast was so much more meaningful. So the thing about fasting is it clears space for us to pray, or for us to read the Bible, or for us to intentionally spend time with people. Fasting is about making space for something else, something with a spiritual purpose. It's not just about denying ourselves something, because that would be a nice thing to do. So I'm excited for what you might talk about fasting as you work through this curriculum.